Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel Geographyguru. This is the second episode of class 10th economics chapter number 2 sectors of Indian economy. In the previous episode we discussed about what is an economic activity, how it is different from non-economic activity, and we also classified the economic activities into three sectors: primary sector, secondary sector and in the tertiary sector. We also try to understand them by taking the real life examples. In the second episode we will try to understand how these sectors depends on each other. ये एक दूसरे के ऊपर डिपेंड कैसे करते हैं, and we will also discuss about the most important part of this chapter, GDP. What is a GDP and how it is calculated. Let's begin. First of all, we will try to understand in short that how these three sectors depends on each others. All these three sectors depends on each others. First of all, we will discuss about the primary sector, how primary sector depends on secondary and tertiary sector. As you know that in primary sector, we produce anything by taking the help of the natural resources. It means primary sector depends on the natural resources to produce anything. And it depends on secondary sectors as well as on tertiary sector. How? Because primary sector depends on secondary sector for its equipment, machine and tools, fertilizers, pesticides and the seeds. Same, the primary sector also depends on the tertiary sector. It depends on the tertiary sector for the services like that of it, transport, health facilities, education facilities, research work, etc. In the same way, secondary sector also depend on the primary and tertiary sector. How? It depends on the secondary sector directly for its raw material, because secondary sector produce the goods using the primary product as raw material. Secondary sector also depends on the tertiary sector for the services like that of a transportation and service like that of a insurance, banking, education and training facilities, research work, etc. In the same way, service sector or the tertiary sector also depends on the primary and the secondary sector. How? As we have studied that service sector provides the service to the primary and the secondary sector, and the growth of the primary and secondary sector also depends on the tertiary sector. But the growth of the tertiary sector also depends on these two sectors, primary and secondary sector, because more the larger size of the primary and secondary sector economy, there will be the more scope of the growth for the tertiary sector. जितने बड़ा प्राइमरी सेक्टर होगा, जितना बड़ा सेकेंडरी सेक्टर होगा, उतनी ही सर्विसेज की डिमांड बढ़ेगी, उतना ही सर्विस सेक्टर है वो भी ग्रो करेगा. सो ऑल दीज थ्री सेक्टर्स, प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी एंड टर्शियरी सेक्टर, these sector depends on each others. They can't survive independently. Let's move to our next topic, that is GDP. What is GDP? GDP क्या होती है? GDP means gross domestic product. अब ये GDP है क्या? That is the full form of GDP, gross domestic product. GDP means the value of final goods and services produced in all three sectors. It is the value of final goods plus services. Primary and secondary sectors, they produce goods and tertiary sector provides the services. So it is the value of all the three sectors, primary sectors, secondary sector and tertiary sector. So it is the value of final goods and services of all three sectors in one particular year. We can take the example. For example, we want to calculate the GDP of 2020. How we will calculate? First of all, we will calculate the value of final goods in primary sector. Okay. Then we will add the value of final goods in secondary sector. Then we will add the value of all the services produced in the tertiary sector. तीनों को जब हम जोड़ देंगे तो हमें क्या मिलेगा? हमें मिलेगा GDP. ओके, तो GDP कितने टाइम की होती है? एक वर्ष की होती है. सो हमें 2020 की कैलकुलेट करनी है, तो हम कैसे कैलकुलेट करेंगे? वी विल एड द वैल्यू ऑफ फाइनल गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज ऑफ ऑल द थ्री सेक्टर्स ऑफ इंडियन इकोनॉमी, प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी एंड टर्शियरी सेक्टर. वाइल कैलकुलेटिंग द GDP, we need to take care of two things. हमें दो चीज़ों को ध्यान में रखना है. फर्स्ट, we should calculate value, not the number of the products. हमें वैल्यू कैलकुलेट करनी है, प्रोडक्ट को कैलकुलेट नहीं करना है. We need not to calculate that how many match box has been produced in any industry. हमें ये नहीं देखना कितने मैच बॉक्स बने. We need to calculate the value only. We need to count the numbers of cars produced in any industry. We need not to count the total number of vehicles produced in any industry. हमें उनकी वैल्यू को कैलकुलेट करना है, हमें नंबर से कोई लेना देना नहीं है. Second thing we need to take care while calculating the GDP is that we should avoid the double counting of the product. We need to avoid the double counting of the product. दो बार काउंटिंग ना हो जाए. कैसे? For example, if we want to calculate the GDP, we need to add the value of final goods. हमें फाइनल गुड्स की वैल्यू को ऐड करना है. कैसे करना है? लेट्स टेक एन एग्जांपल. चलिए हम एग्जांपल लेते हैं एक. कैलकुलेशन ऑफ फाइनल गुड्स. As thousands of economic activities are going around in all three sectors, so it is almost impossible to take account of every such activities. So we should check only final goods and services. हम फाइनल गुड्स और सर्विसेज को ही कैलकुलेट करते हैं. कैसे? लेट्स फाइंड आउट. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अ फार्मर हु सेल्स wheat to a flour mill for ₹8 per kg. The mill grinds the wheat and sells the flour to a biscuit company for ₹10 per kg. That 10 per kg includes the value of wheat. Then the biscuit company uses the flour and things such as sugar and oil to make 4 packets of biscuits, and it sells the biscuits in the market to the consumer for ₹60 per kg. It means ₹15 per packet. So biscuits are the final goods. Biscuits क्या है? Final goods हैं. Goods that reach the consumers, and it includes everything. It includes the primary goods, that is wheat, and intermediate goods, that is फ्लोर. ओके, तो उन दोनों की वैल्यू इसमें ऑलरेडी कैलकुलेट है. तो हमें जब जीडीपी कैलकुलेट करनी है तो वी नीड नॉट टू कैलकुलेट वीट एंड द फ्लोर सेपरेटली. वी नीड टू कैलकुलेट द वैल्यू ऑफ बिस्किट ओनली, क्योंकि उसमें उनके रेट ऑलरेडी जुड़ चुके हैं, उनकी वैल्यू ऑलरेडी जुड़ चुकी है. सो दिस इज द वैल्यू ऑफ फाइनल गुड्स. ₹60 is the value of final goods, and while calculating the GDP we need to avoid the double counting. Double counting क्या होगी? अगर हम wheat और flour को भी इसके साथ ऐड करते हैं तो हमें वो नहीं करना. तो हमें क्या करना है? We need to add the value of final goods only, means बिस्किट की वैल्यू को ऐड करना है. So while calculating the GDP we need to take care of two things. First, we need to add the value, not the number of products. Second, we need to avoid the double counting of the products. So that's all in this session. We discussed how all these three sectors depends on each others, and then in the end we try to understand what is GDP and how we can calculate GDP. I hope that you all are doing well. लगे रहिए ऐसे ही. Thank you. Bye bye. Have a nice day.